Union News, the 6th of April, 2024. Welcome to Union News, your guide to what's happening in the UK labour and trade union movement. Reporting is by Pat Harrington and music is by Tim Bragg. In this week's edition, teachers at NEU conference demand stronger action on pay dispute. Cleaners, porters, and caterers face privatisation threat at East Suffolk and North Essex NHS Foundation Trust. Titanic, equal pay claims, Scottish Government urged to act.
Teachers at NEU conference demand stronger action on pay dispute. In a decisive move, teachers attending the National Education Union (NEU) conference in Bournemouth voted to take a stand on the government's pay offer. The motion, passed on Thursday, calls for a snap poll to gauge members' views. If the majority rejects the offer with a convincing turnout, the union will escalate its efforts by pushing for a formal strike ballot. This decision follows last week's overwhelming vote by NEU members in favour of strikes over pay in a consultative ballot. While the NEU National Executive initially proposed avoiding a formal ballot this year, delegates fought to go beyond leadership recommendations. An amendment now instructs the NEU to present the government's pay and funding offer in a snap poll. If rejected, a formal ballot for strikes will be pursued. Notably, a significant minority, 37%, voted even more clearly in favour of moving toward a formal strike ballot after the consultative vote. This signals a strong desire among rank-and-file activists within the union for a more militant approach than what the leadership initially proposed. Paul, an NEU member from Tower Hamlets, emphasised the importance of the vote. While achieving a formal ballot would have been ideal, the substantial result demonstrates that the best activists in the union want to go further. A serious number of people are ready to push for national industrial action. Daniel Kabeda, NEU Union General Secretary, made an unusual intervention during the conference by arguing against a formal strike ballot. Delegates on the conference floor expressed a clear desire for hard-hitting action to address the ongoing pay dispute. As the NEU continues its fight for fair pay and better conditions, teachers across the country are watching closely, ready to stand united in defence of their rights.
Cleaners, porters, and caterers face privatisation threat at East Suffolk and North Essex NHS Foundation Trust. In a startling development, cleaners, porters, and caterers employed by the East Suffolk and North Essex NHS Foundation Trust, ISNEFT, have been informed that their jobs may be moved out of the NHS. Chief Executive Nick Hume's letter to staff revealed plans to privatise housekeeping, security, and other services at Colchester and Ipswich hospitals, as well as ESNEFT's community services. While Ipswich Hospital's facilities are currently outsourced to private company OCS, with the contract ending in April next year, the ISNEFT board has now decided to put all services out to a single tender over the next 12 months. Unison Eastern Head of Health, Caroline Hennessy, expressed concern, stating, "Workers are being thrown to the wolves so that some private company can milk cash out of the health service." The decision has sparked outrage among staff, who believe that bringing facilities management back in-house would lead to better treatment for employees and higher quality services for patients. As the battle unfolds, Nick Hume and the board may find themselves facing a determined workforce unwilling to accept this attack lying down. Titanic equal pay claims, Scottish Government urged to act. Equal pay claims in Scotland's councils are likened to the ill-fated Titanic approaching an iceberg, warns GMB Scotland. The union has called on the Scottish Government to intervene urgently as councils across the country continue to ignore workers' demands. Strikes in progress. A 4-day strike is already underway among low-paid, predominantly female carers at Falkirk Council. Workers in Renfrewshire and West Dunbartonshire are set to follow suit next week after regrading claims were rejected. The ongoing strikes represent only the tip of the iceberg. GMB Scotland is already involved in equal pay campaigns in Dundee, Perth and Kinross, Fife and Murray. Over a dozen other councils face mounting calls for pay reviews. GMB Scotland's Louise Gilmore warns that workers cannot bear the burden of potential council bankruptcies. If councils continue to ignore the issue, the the consequences could be disastrous. Gilmore urges First Minister Humza Yousaf to establish a specialist body. This body would adjudicate on claims and enforce compensation awards. The reality of equal pay claims cannot be ignored, and local authorities must act swiftly. The scale of these claims is unimaginable for councils already facing service cuts. Blaming equal pay claims instead of addressing systematic pay discrimination is both dishonest and disgraceful. Gilmore emphasized that women workers will prevail in these claims. Proper management now is crucial to prevent disastrous consequences for communities. Equal pay is not going away. Let us learn from past mistakes and ensure justice prevails.
NEU conference urges UK government to endorse Palestinian rights. In a resounding show of solidarity, delegates at the National Education Union (NEU) conference in Bournemouth have called on the British government to cease its role as an enabler of Israel's apartheid policies, violence, and anti-Palestinian racism. The motion, passed on Thursday, unequivocally condemns the Israeli government as racist and asserts that it has a case to answer on genocide. The NEU delegates assert that Israel's current hard-right, racist government significantly contributes to conflict, violence, and war in both Palestine and Israel. This bold stance should embolden NEU members to take action during the Palestine Day of Action on Wednesday, May 1. Delegates remain defiant even after Tory Education Secretary Gillian Keegan criticised the motion as inappropriate and reflective of the New's divisive ideology. RV? Another speaker from the floor challenged Keegan directly. Keegan should visit staff rooms and witness the revulsion against the killing of children and women, as well as the bombing of schools. What truly divides us is supporting an apartheid regime abroad and perpetuating anti-Muslim rhetoric at home. The motion also highlights the British government's attempts to criminalise the peaceful tactics of boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and its efforts to stigmatise solidarity with Palestinians. In response, the NEU Union commits to publishing and circulating educational resources that enhance members' understanding of Palestine and Israel. The Union further reaffirms its support for the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, PSC. As the NEU takes this principled stand, educators across the country join hands in advocating for justice, human rights, and a peaceful resolution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict.
Desperate need of reform, TUC urges overhaul of statutory sick pay. Statutory sick pay in the UK remains shockingly inadequate, leaving low-paid workers vulnerable and without essential financial support during illness. As of today, April 6, 2024, the weekly statutory sick pay rate will increase to £116.75, but this still represents a mere 17% of average earnings. Workers face a 3-day waiting period before receiving statutory sick pay. For someone working a typical 5-day week, this amounts to a paltry £44 for the first week, just 7% of average weekly earnings. The Trades Union Congress, TUC, demands urgent action. It says the government should remove the lower earnings limit. The TUC say that the government should raise the rate of sick pay, eliminate the 3-day waiting period. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed the desperate need for reform in the sick pay system. Gender disparities. Analysis by the TUC reveals that 1.3 million people do not earn enough to qualify for statutory sick pay. Shockingly, 70% of these individuals are women. 0-hours contract workers are 8 times more likely to miss out on statutory sick pay due to insufficient earnings. Urgent action is required to protect workers' rights and financial well-being. As the debate intensifies, the government must address these glaring inequalities and ensure that no worker is left without essential support during illness.
And finally, ONS staff strike, union takes a stand against mandatory office attendance. PC's members at the Office for National Statistics, ONS, have delivered a resounding message: mandatory office attendance is unacceptable. Over 73% of staff have voted in favour of striking in response to the new policy that demands 40% physical workplace presence. The new policy has caused considerable disruption, particularly for staff with childcare and other care responsibilities. ONS had previously introduced successful home and hybrid working arrangements during the pandemic, even earning recognition as a finalist for the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development's Best Flexible Working Initiative. Staff were reassured that flexible arrangements would remain in place. However, management's heavy-handed approach has undermined trust and goodwill among ONS employees. PCs argues that management's case lacks evidence and refuses to consider a more gradual and flexible transition. General Secretary Fran Heathcote calls for an immediate pause in policy implementation and meaningful dialogue to protect staff interests. As the dispute unfolds, ONS bosses must recognize the importance of fair and sustainable working arrangements. The consequences of disregarding staff well-being could be severe.
If you've enjoyed this edition of Union News, please consider subscribing via YouTube or your chosen platform.